I am here with our friends at the League of Conservation Voters Education Fund to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. As we know, let's think about where we were a year ago, or just over a year ago. President Biden signed the IRA into law on August 16th, 2022. This was the largest climate investment in U.S. history. Really exciting moment for us. Unlocks a ton of money to be able to help us fight the climate crisis. Before we get to that, though, within this bill, there was a lot of other great stuff too, including the ability to reduce costs for those on Medicare, including creating a new prescription drug law that allows Medicare to negotiate differently for certain drugs with different drug companies to get lower costs, including the $35 a month cap on insulin charges through Medicare. This took effect January 1st, 2023, and the negotiated drug prices will be in effect in 2026. That will be a direct savings for people, and really excited that the federal government was able to put that into play. But the big crux of this bill that we're talking about today, in the IRA, it includes $370 billion in clean energy and climate funding through a mixture of tax breaks, grants, and loans. This is money that is available for people in our communities to shift your homes and many other things, shifting into renewable energy, which not only is better for our planet, but will also save you money. And so today we are joined by Julie Tighe, the New York League of Conservation Voters president, and Matthew Salton, who is with the Voters Education Fund through the League. Thank you both for being here today. I will say, feel free to ask questions. Additionally, on the Bond Act, the $4.2 billion Bond Act that voters approved last year on the ballot, that is funding more for municipalities and such to be able to do big environmental projects, but they are tied together. Of course, state funding and federal funding are always tied together. So feel free, put questions in the chat. Our team is monitoring that. Shout out to our team, Team Hinchey. Thank you so much for your work and for putting this together. Put questions in the chat. We've got a couple submitted. We'll have time for Q&A afterwards. But right now, let's jump right into it. Julie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for that gracious introduction and for hosting this tonight. We think it is really important to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and what's been made available from the federal government, in addition to all the great work you do here in our state. And I do want to commend you for your unwavering commitment to the environment and dedication to advancing sustainable policies here in our state. It's truly commendable. You already kind of encapsulated it in the moment, but we're talking about a really monumental achievement. The Inflation Reduction Act, or the Federal Climate Act, is the largest investment the country has ever made, and it's quite possibly the largest investment any country in the entire world has ever made in fighting climate change. It really marked a turning point in our nation's commitment to a healthier and greener future. This clean energy plan works by incentivizing both people and businesses to make greener choices. The IRA is paving a way for a cleaner, more resilient future, and it demonstrates that environmental policy can be a win-win for both our wallets and the planet, as you said. In the moments ahead, I'm going to talk about these incentives and the myriad of consumer benefits that are available. There are more details that are going to come out later. They're still rolling out this very massive plan as they're making sure that they're wisely spending taxpayer dollars. I do want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I hope you'll find this information useful and actionable. We have put together at the League of Conservation Voters Education Fund an IRA consumer guide that's available on our website. So if you're not already on our list, please feel free to sign up on your way out so you can grab that information and make it available. So we can go to the next slide. So we know that this Inflation Reduction Act covers a lot of things, right? $370 billion is real money, and it's not for any one thing. It's for a lot of different things. It's funding for clean energy. It's funding for clean transportation. It's investments in agriculture, for healthy communities, for clean manufacturing, for helping decarbonize our buildings, for investing in public lands and water. So it really covers a whole array of issues that impact climate change. We can go to the next slide. We know that the benefits are going to be vast for us. Under this program, they will get a roughly 40% reduction in climate emissions by 2030 and reduce the amount of carbon emissions by 1 gigaton by around that time. That is a huge amount of reductions because we're providing incentives to make these changes. On average, households can save a lot of money on energy, including up to $1,800 to take advantage of electrification incentives that the IRA offers. And the law is incentivizing investments in disadvantaged and low-income communities and those communities that have been most impacted by fossil fuels. So 40% of those benefits are going to be invested in those areas. And it's expected that this is going to create millions and millions of jobs and help to reduce premature deaths and asthma attacks, which is the #1 cause of school absenteeism in our state. We know that the president has set a goal of reducing all emissions by 50% by 2030, and this puts that within reach of that. Under our current scenario, sort of a scenario without any additional actions taken by various players, we would have a reduction in about 24 to 35%, but the Inflation Reduction Act really stacks that up and makes sure that we get much closer to our commitments under the Paris Climate Accords. Next slide. We can go to the next slide. Maybe. Uh-oh. Or not. Hold on. One second. We're having, there we go. Little temporary technology snafu, as happens from time to time. There we go. Next slide. All right. So there are some big clean energy incentives that are available. Most of the clean energy incentives that we're talking about on this slide are about what companies are doing to invest in clean energy. So there's been a 10-year extension of a 30% tax credit for investments in clean renewable energy and energy storage and in what they call direct pay. So direct pay is where, like, if you're not a taxpayer, you can't get a tax credit under the federal law. So direct pay means they're basically going to give you the same amount of money as you would have gotten if you were a tax-paying entity. So that's really about not-for-profits who are not required to pay federal taxes. Co-ops, for example, are nonprofits, and government entities. So, for example, your local government, the town of Highland, for example, wouldn't be eligible for a tax credit, but they could get funding from direct pay for an activity they want to do that's eligible, such as putting solar on, local town property. There's an additional 10% bonus for new renewable energy and energy storage projects in low-income communities, really trying to help out those communities that have the least to be able to afford some of these, because we know those areas need more investments. And there's a $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund that's going to be helping to promote more investments by private industry in clean energy. So that is really a big fund that's available to help promote private investments on that front. For transportation, some of the big things that are starting to be out there much more publicly is there's electric vehicle tax credits of up to $7,500. It's based on how much of the car is made in America, including some of its components. In particular, there's a big emphasis on batteries and whether or not the vehicles were union made, for example. There are income limits and there are limits on the amount, the value of the car, but we'll get to that a little bit later. In addition to the federal tax credit, you can get up to $2,000 in a rebate from the state of New York, which is really exciting. So it adds on to the savings that you can get from the federal government, and that actually happens right at the dealership when you buy a car. We're also really excited. A longtime priority for the league has been getting all electric school buses. Thanks to the state, there is now a requirement to move to all electric school buses. So there is funding for all electric school buses. Up to 30% of the cost of electric school buses can come from the federal government. And the state of New York has actually already gotten grants in the first round for 184 buses here. For the first time, there is funding for used vehicles. Like there's been an EV tax credit that was much more limited in the past. Now there's a tax credit for you to buy a used EV, so that we know a lot of people, they're not buying a car right off the lot. Not everyone can afford to buy a brand new car. So this is an opportunity for people to access used electric vehicles and get a tax credit to help reduce that cost. There's also funding available for getting EV charging infrastructure so that you can't just have the vehicle, you also need a place to charge them. For people who can do charging at home, you can get up to $1,000 for reducing the cost of that home EV charging equipment. There's also $2.8 billion in grants to convert manufacturing facilities to make EVs. Again, the emphasis of this law is not just to give benefits, but for people to buy things, but also for us to be manufacturing more of this, including the component parts here in the United States. There's a Healthy Communities program where there's $333 million available for air quality monitoring, in particular in environmental justice communities, to make sure that we know what's happening and to find sources of air pollution to help reduce that. There's a new $3 billion environmental and climate justice block grant program that will enable more funding to support those communities to transition to greener and cleaner alternatives. There's reinstatement of a tax to help fund cleanup of Superfund sites on oil companies. There's $3 billion to revitalize communities who've been damaged by federal highway projects and improve transportation access to help reduce pollution. That's really critical. And we know, I mentioned earlier already, that there's a goal to try and get 40% of the funds that are available to go to disadvantaged communities and communities that have been overburdened by pollution. So that's really a positive investment to make sure people who have been impacted by pollution are also seeing the benefits associated with that. I mentioned clean manufacturing. Many of you may have heard of Micron, which is a new chip manufacturing facility that will be going into Syracuse. This is the type of funding that the federal government is starting to support to make sure that we're having more manufacturing done, clean tech manufacturing in the United States. So there's tax incentives for that clean energy manufacturing. There's investments being made in cleaning the federal fleets, so they're leading by example, as well as labeling of products appropriately and supporting a federal Buy Clean program so that the federal government is buying things and using materials and manufacturers that reduce the amount of pollution that they're generating. And of course, there's $6 billion for these manufacturing transformative industrial programs to help make energy intensive manufacturing industries that are otherwise subject to the international competitive industries, making sure that they are at a level playing field with others while they're helping to reduce the amount of pollution that they're generating. We certainly don't want to disadvantage our manufacturing in this state or in this country from others while we're making this transition to clean energy. So for buildings, there's an expansion of tax credits for commercial and residential energy efficiency improvements and public building upgrades. We all know the best energy that you use is the less energy you use, right? That's the first thing we need to do, is reduce the amount of energy that we're wasting, and we can be much more energy efficient. I'm sure, like when I used to live in Albany and my house was built in 1853, I know there's a lot of communities and houses like that in the area where you live as well. Kingston is obviously historic, and there's a lot of old buildings that are not terribly energy efficient. So we have a lot we can do to help reduce the amount of energy that we're wasting, basically. There's specifically $1 billion to support disadvantaged communities and formerly industrial communities that are struggling right now, to help them move away from those fossil fuel and mining productions towards new, cleaner opportunities for generating jobs. There's funding available to make affordable housing more water and energy efficient and resilient to climate change, because again, those are the communities and the folks that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and least able to afford making some of these transitions. And there's a big chunk of money being made available for energy efficiency job training and making sure that we have funding for these energy efficiency projects and consumer rebates. We'll talk a bit more about those at the end, because there's a whole slew of rebates that are available for various kinds of programs. Next slide. I know near and dear to your district's heart is agricultural and public lands. We know how important that is, what a big part of the economy that is. There is $5 billion for wildfire protection and urban forestry. Those are things that we need to make sure. We're providing some more investments in coastal restoration. There is more investments in agriculture. So these are something that's really exciting. We'll be talking more about that in the Farm Bill in the future, as that is certainly something that is top priority for us, making sure that we have a good Farm Bill going forward. So we touched on this a little bit. The senator touched on this a little bit, but why should we switch to cleaner energy and to more energy efficiency? We're going to have cleaner air because we're going to have less air pollution. As I mentioned earlier, asthma is the #1 cause of school absenteeism, and that also causes parents to miss work because they have to take care of their kids. There's more hospital bills that are paid as you go to the doctor. So there's a lot of opportunities beyond just asthma, but that is a very, very tangible thing that people can understand and realize that there's a lot of opportunities to reduce the amount of air pollution that we have. If you use less energy, you're going to save money, right? That's just plain and simple. That's really exciting, an opportunity, and there's going to help you get new appliances, for example. There's incentives that will help you get newer, more energy efficient and cleaner appliances in your homes. So our friends at Rewiring America have created an IRA savings calculator to help people figure out how much you yourselves would be able to save under the Inflation Reduction Act. So we've done an example here. So say you're a homeowner who's living in Kingston with a household size of 3 and your income is about $58,000, right? You can put that information into their website and it'll tell you roughly how much money you could save. So we know based on if you took advantage of all the credits that are out there, which may not be able to, but you could get up to $14,000 in upfront discounts. So that's not money you have to shell out. It's money that you will save when you're going to take advantage of the various rebates that are out there because they're on the hood type of rebates. You can be eligible for up to 100% of the cost for certain types of equipment that's out there. There's another $5,200 in tax credits that would be available, and you're estimated that you would save about $1,100 a year in energy efficiency. So that's if you took advantage of all of these items together, but that is the opportunity that you could get. There are income limits associated with a variety of these categories. So I think we can go to the next slide. I'm jumping ahead here. So people may not understand there's 2 main mechanisms for consumers to take advantage of the funding available in the Inflation Reduction Act. One is a tax credit, right? So that's where at the end of the year, when you're paying the IRS in April, or if you get an extension later on in the year, that this would help to offset any taxes that you owe. So this means if you don't owe anything in taxes, then you can't actually benefit from getting the tax credit. But if you do owe taxes, then you could get, for example, up to $7,500 from off of your taxes for an electric vehicle purchase. So it helps you reduce the amount of money that you're spending, but you don't get it back. At least that's how it's currently structured. There's some changes coming on that front, but that's how you would be able to get that later on. Rebates are where you get the money regardless of whether or not you owe taxes. And most frequently that's applied right at the point of sale, right? So for example, right, as I mentioned earlier, if you're buying an electric car in the state of New York right now, you get that $2,000 off the hood before you pay anything. It reduces the amount of money that you have to pay when you purchase the vehicle. So that is something that comes right off the top and you don't have to pay it up front. So eligibility is based on the area median income. So you're not treated the same as if you live in New York City versus Buffalo versus California. This is really hyper localized so that it's taking into account the local economy and what the area median income is. So for Kingston, the area median income is $58,840. That means if you have an income of less than $47,000 for the household, you can get up to 100% of the project cost covered for eligible projects. If you're making between $47,000 and $88,000, you can get up to half of the cost of the project. So this is to make sure that people can take advantage, and you're providing more benefit to people who can least afford it. For electric vehicles, right now, for purchasing a car, the car cannot cost more at an MSRP of $55,000. For SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, it's up to $80,000, depending on the model of the vehicle. There's also income caps on how much money that you can make, and it depends on whether or not you're filing by yourself as a head of household or as a joint filer. But if for a single person, it's $150,000. For head of household, it's $225,000. And for a joint filer, it's $300,000. Again, starting in 2024, they'll be able to do this right at the point of sale, so that you can reduce the amount you're paying on the front end rather than having to wait to pay it off in your taxes. So that's going to be something that starts next year. So there are, again, a whole slew of items that you could be purchasing and get credits from the federal government. Some of them are available now. There's a lot of details on all of this. We have links. This presentation will be available on our website, and I'm sure we can send it around in the follow-up email. But there's funding for battery storage installations that you can get credits for. If you want to get geothermal heating, that's something that you can get a credit for now. There's also a New York State credit that we passed last year. Thank you, Senator, for that. Again, the electric vehicles we've talked about, that's available now. Rooftop solar, used electric vehicles, heat pump air conditioners and heaters, heat pump water heaters, weatherization, which is where you're making your building. If you're putting insulation in, for example, that's considered weatherization. Electric vehicle chargers, and oftentimes you need to upgrade your electric panel in order for you to do some of these other things. So those are all credits that are available now. There are more that are coming next year, right? So I think we have heat pumps on both of these lists, just for the record. But some of these are going to be more available later. More information will be available later. But you can get a higher level for heat pump air conditioners, for electric panels, for energy efficiency, for electric wiring, for the heat pump water heater, for all of these items, for heat pump clothes dryers, for electric or induction stoves. So more information is coming on those, and we expect it's going to be the first quarter of 2024. So that's going to be something that comes out more. We are waiting for the IRS, I believe, on a lot of these, and you'll be shocked to know they are not the fastest moving government agency that's out there. I feel like we might be near the end. All right, so there are more things. The nice thing is you can add these programs together, right? You can get funding from the state, and you can get funding from the federal government for a variety of projects. So NYSERDA has a lot of information about funding that's available on their website as well, but they have something called the Assisted Home Performance with Energy Star program that provides discounts of up to $5,000 per household for projects that qualify based on your income. There's funding available for heat pumps from the state for that. It's between $1,000 and $4,000 of incentives that you can help to support you getting a heat pump. Central Hudson, the local utility, provides a rebate of up to $1,000 for hot water heaters that are using heat pumps. And they have a up to $2,000 credit for ground source heat pumps, so that you're transitioning people off of gas potentially, or off of petroleum or oil of some sort, propane, onto using heat pumps. This is a good way to take advantage of that, taking advantage of all this free money. I mentioned already, there's on the geothermal, you can get up to $5,000 in tax credits from New York State, so that you can help to transition over to a more reliably priced form of heat, because geothermal, once it's installed, is pretty much, you're not paying for any fuel. There's no fluctuation the way there is for gas or heating oil or things like that. So there's a lot of things that are out there. It's complicated, I'm not going to lie, and we've not got into a huge amount of depth on each of these things, because it really depends on what you want to get for your household. But we wanted to make sure people are available and are looking for all these tax benefits and rebates that are available to help you to make the move towards clean energy options for a variety of different components and appliances in your homes, and taking advantage of the state funding that's available as well. I feel like this is our last slide. Oh, there we go. And I know we have some questions.
Yes, thank you, Julie, so much. And Matt, thank you for moving the presentation. Appreciate it. There's a lot of good information and a lot of money that people should be taking advantage of. So we had some questions that were submitted previously, and we've gotten some questions today in the chat. Please continue to put questions in the chat. As we're asking, if you think of something, please put it in. And just a reminder that this presentation will be saved on our page, and we will circulate it around too. So for anyone, if you know friends and family members who are not tuning in today, right now, feel free to send this to them afterwards if you think it would be helpful. First question for you both is, there's a lot of great information in here. As you said, we can send around that list. Who can people call? Where can people go to get more information on each of these individual rebates or tax credits that's available?
Well, I'd say that I'd say the first place that one can go is to our website. I put it in the chat here, and your team can put it in the Facebook comments. It's nylcvef.org/IRA-guide/. And that's just going to give you kind of general information about what might be available. And that guide itself contains different links, such as the IRA calculator that you saw Julie go over. And then there are resources from NYSERDA that Ethan just put in that goes over some of these as well.
Great. And I know our team is putting in the link in the Facebook comments, the link that you referenced, Julie, in the presentation, for people to be able to calculate what they would be able to get. So that will be in the comments as well. Definitely play around with that. We have a question from John from Highland. He just completed a ground-mounted solar installation with net metering. He would like to know what provisions the IRA includes that he should be aware of and how to fully take advantage of them.
Yep. So basically, like Julie went over, if you're doing a solar project and you apply and you qualify for it, you can get 30% of the cost covered. That's if you did the project in 2023. Unfortunately, if you did it prior to that, you're not going to be eligible for that credit because it was before the things went into effect. But if it's this year or in the future, you'll be able to apply for that 30% tax credit.
So depending on how you file your taxes, you should definitely be aware of this. Like when you go to file your taxes, if you have an accountant, you should flag that for them. If you use one of those online services, they usually will have a drop-down menu and they will offer you what those various opportunities are. And if it's not there, you should definitely seek it out through one of those. But they typically, those online services like TaxSlayer, they will typically update their systems every year to identify some of those tax credits that are available, both from the state and from the federal government.
Thank you. Our next question is Kitty from New Paltz. What green methods and/or sources will New York adapt or develop to provide electricity?
So there are a number of things that the state actually has already committed to doing under the state's climate law called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, sometimes affectionately called the CLCPA. But the state's climate law essentially says that we have to have all of our electricity be zero emission by 2040. And the ways that we're getting there are we're planning on getting 9 gigawatts of energy from offshore wind. And the state right now has under contract over 8 gigawatts. That's 8,000 megawatts. That's enough to power over 6 million homes with renewable energy from offshore wind. There is a commitment to do now 10,000 megawatts of energy from community solar. So that is something that is active. It was actually in the law, it's 6 gigawatts. And because we're doing so well on getting more solar out there, they've actually upped the goal to 10,000, which is very exciting. There's going to be onshore wind that's happening across our state. And there are a number of projects around New York where there's wind projects that are in place. We, of course, get about 27% of our energy already from renewable hydropower. And there are a variety of other technologies. Battery energy storage is going to be part of the solution. I would expect anaerobic digestion and methane capture to be part of the solution for electricity, as well as potentially for fuel, for transportation, or for manufacturing. So there are a lot of things. There's new technology being evaluated, such as hydrogen, and where that fits in the mix is still to be determined, whether that's on electricity or more for transportation and use in hydrogen fuel cells. Fuel cells is definitely something that can help with providing reliable electricity. So there are a lot of different items that are out there to help us with green electricity.
So the takeaway is we are well on our way.
Yes.
You're saying we are well on our way.
We are.
Our next question, thank you, is from Dawn from Westkill. When will the low-income rebates for heat pumps and hot water pumps be available? And what is the income level verification process and requirements?
Yeah, so these things are to be expected sometime early next year in the first few months. That program is actually going to be run through NYSERDA. Right now, NYSERDA is waiting on these funds to be released from the Federal Department of Energy. And once they do, then they'll set up their program, and we'll definitely be talking a lot about it and getting that information out there. In terms of the income level verification, you'll be presenting that information then to NYSERDA, and however they choose to do that, it's based on gross income, so before taxes. And remember, that's all relative to the area and median income in which you live. If you make under 80% of that, 100% of the benefits will be eligible. If you make between that 80% and 150% of that area and median income, you can get half of the projects covered. And then if you make anything above that 150% of the area median income, you won't be eligible.
Thank you. And one thing I want to note too, we talked a lot in the presentation about environmental justice communities. And for our district, we actually have a lot of potential environmental justice communities. We are still waiting on the exact numbers for the new part of our district, so the eastern part of the 41st, which we'll share and we can put in the comments when we get it. But for the western part, there are 27 potential environmental justice areas in Ulster County alone and 8 in Greene County. So as you're reading these things or looking through this presentation again, environmental justice communities are not just places in urban areas or in New York City. We in the rural communities absolutely qualify under the environmental justice community provisions. So keep that in mind. And we can always provide some more information on that as well if you have questions. I'll jump to a couple questions that we are getting in the chat right now. A question from Dawn. Is the system set up to actually be able to take advantage of the rebates specifically for heat pumps?
Yeah, so so there are different types, as Julie kind of went through the list there, what you're eligible for. Specifically for heat pumps, there are different types of heat pumps. There's the air source heat pump, which will be replacing heating, and then also your AC unit. It's one unit that can heat and cool. And then there are also hot water heater heat pumps as well that will take the place of like a boiler. It's just a hyper efficient way of doing it that runs on electricity.
I think the question though is, are the systems already set up so that they can take advantage of the rebates now?
No, that'll be early next year.
So again, that's ones that Matt mentioned that NYSERDA is going to be running. And so that's something that they're waiting for the money to be released from the Department of Energy, right?
Yep.
Do we know when that will be next year, or just generally early next year right now?
Just generally early next year. I asked pretty recently.
Wonderful.
I think
And we will I
I
know
think we're
you'll stay in
expecting
touch
it's
with
going to
us.
be like, yeah, I think we're expecting it to be around the first quarter, but you know, it's federal government.
Yep.
Not sure.
Things always change, but we will definitely, as we hear more direction on the timeline, we will be sharing that out. And of course, we know you all will be communicating that loudly from the rooftops as well.
Sure.
Another question from Vanessa. Are the EV incentives lasting for a number of years?
Yes. So right now, the EV incentives are supposed to be indefinite. There was a while ago where we had that $7,500 tax credit, and it was actually capped at 200,000 vehicles per manufacturer, and this essentially got rid of it. As for the other, most tax credits, it runs through the year 2032 until we can either put it back up again, increase it, do a number of things to it, but we're good for about 10 years.
Thank you. We have a question from Lori. Are consumers restricted to certain installers to get these incentives, or can she or a family member do the install herself? Assuming that that person has the skills to do it.
Yep, no, you're good to do it on your own. One of the things that we're looking at right now and hearing about are contractors that might not be willing to do these sorts of things yet, specifically because the rebates aren't here yet. But once that they are available, I imagine a number of contractors are going to be selling a lot of this work and their expertise in it.
Thank you. We've got a question from Donal. Thank you, thanking us for this presentation. Thank you both for this presentation. What avenue should they take to explore direct pay for municipalities for clean energy upgrades?
Okay, so for the municipalities, I think here you really want to be advocating to your town supervisor or your mayor or your town board or the village board or what have you, the city council, depending on your form of government, right? And encouraging them to go and seek out this funding. It is definitely available now through the IRS for them to be able to go do that. And so this is definitely something where you want to encourage the local governments to be pursuing that opportunity. I think a lot of local governments will be properly encouraged to do that. Everyone likes to take advantage of free money. And this is certainly free money. And I think there'll be some funding available for not necessarily for municipalities, but for schools from the state of New York, also from the Bond Act and from their Cleaner, Greener Schools program. So they might be able to take advantage of both the direct pay program from the IRA, as well as from a Bond Act or other NYSERDA funding that can help them reduce, increase the amount of green energy that they're using. So I think starting with asking the local government representatives if they have plans to take advantage of this, and then trying to help push them to go pursue this funding. If there's a municipality that you have in mind, perhaps we can help you with that.
And I would just like to tack on to that, in addition to the direct pay and everything else, there was a thing set up by the IRA called the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, or TICTAC, and that is designed to help nonprofits, community groups, churches, schools, and local governments tap into some of these resources by helping them write these grant applications. And for the state of New York, we're in EPA Region 2. Our TICTAC is We Act for Environmental Justice, based in Harlem, but they're for the entire state of New York and for the state of New Jersey. And we'll be working with them to disseminate some of that information as well.
Great. And so if anyone listening, if you want to get in touch with them, you can reach out to us. Please contact our office and we can connect you both with, of course, the League and with We Act for further questions. We have a question from Ethan. He shared a link to NYSERDA, they're part of their website for the Inflation Reduction Act, and said, which is applicable for building owners / landlords trying to upgrade mixed use commercial buildings. So how do you discern which items are available for building owners and landlords?
Yeah, so some of these are meant to be for residents and for folks who own their own homes. Others are commercial. in their nature. So it would be the commercial aspect of that if it's a building they own as their business. And then there are a number of different incentives there that differ, and that differ by the size of the building and a number of other factors as well.
And is that clearly delineated in the lists that are out there currently?
I'd have to look at that specific link, but yeah, so they have Inflation Reduction Act, businesses, and this would fall into that category.
Okay, so anyone looking for commercial or mixed use should be looking specifically under the business sections of the lists. Great. We have a question from Lori. Could the utilities like Central Hudson link to the state and IRA incentives in addition to their own?
If the question is about them making the information available, I think the answer to that is yes, they could do that. Very often utilities will do that to make you aware, to take advantage of those various programs. So if they're not currently, we can certainly reach out and suggest that they do that to help make sure more people have information about what's available. But very often utilities do that to help make sure, again, people get to take advantage of free money.
Yeah, and I think Con Ed does have some of that information on their site.
So I haven't looked at the Central Hudson website, but certainly we can look into that and encourage them to do so if they are not already.
And we will do that as well with our contacts at Central Hudson. That's a great thing that they should be promoting. And again, they have done, and I know that they've promoted some of the geothermal rebates and such that we've had before, but with all of this coming down, they should be prepared to be promoting all of it, which is great. We have another question from Rich, who was actually something that I was wondering. So thank you, Rich. Does NYSERDA have some type of community ambassadors that could help individuals navigate these incentives? Is there anyone out there who really could help people figure out, outside of just the individual calculators, what they're eligible for and how to get it?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that's something that we can check in with NYSERDA and see what they have available on that front. But certainly making sure, I mean, that's one reason why we're also making sure that we're trying to educate people about what's out there so that they at least can be thinking about it and looking for it and asking for it. But it would be helpful if there's more government resources to help clarify that. So certainly it's something that we can follow up with NYSERDA. And by we, I mean Matt.
Thank you. And we will too. And I think, it'd be great to have, and this is something that, we can work on and work with NYSERDA to have more public information campaigns about all of these dollars coming down, because we of course want our communities in New York to get, and all of our folks in New York to get what's out there and be able to transition in an economically feasible way. We have another question. If I already purchased a heat pump before the rebates are available, can I get the discount afterward? I think you touched on that a little bit, but just to confirm, right, that this year and forward?
Yeah. So unfortunately, if you already purchased something and then you want to hold on to the receipt and then try to get a rebate, for example, next year, you're not going to be able to do that, which is why a lot of folks are waiting until early next year to do some of these purchase some of these products that are rebate eligible.
Thank you. Another question, do used electric vehicles need to meet the same sourcing requirements of new EVs?
So they actually don't. They're much more lax for the used EVs. The only criteria is that it's a used EV for under $25,000. But the sourcing requirements and the battery and the final assembly requirements don't take effect.
Okay. And do hybrids qualify for the EV tax credit?
So some hybrids do. If they're plug-in hybrid with a large enough battery, it's a 7-kilowatt battery. The IRS has a website that actually has a list of current vehicles that are eligible for these incentives, but just a regular hybrid that might take gas will not, but then all electric vehicles will.
Great. And I don't know if we touched on this yet or not, but how is median income defined?
Yep. So median income is defined within an area in median income zones based on zip code, and it's done with the data within that specific community. So that's why for this example, we chose a zip code in Kingston.
So that is something that the federal government does for a variety of different programs that exist. So it's not unique to this particular program. So that is something that based on data that is already out there and collected and processed by the US government.
Thank you. And coming off of those coattails, we have another question here. Is there a plan to help those of us who fall above the median income so that we too can benefit?
So folks who actually do fall above the median income can benefit from this. If you're making less than 80% of the median income, you get 100% of the benefits. If you're between 80 and 150% of the benefits, then you can get half of these projects covered. It's only the folks who make over 150% of that area median income, or 1.5 times, that won't be eligible for some of these. So yeah.
And the idea, sorry, Julie.
Go ahead.
Oh, please.
But to your point, Matt, that means that doesn't apply to everything.
Yep.
Right. So it depends, and maybe we could try to identify which ones are income limited and which ones are not. Like we mentioned, for example, more specifically about the EV credits, for example, that's higher, right? It's $150,000 for an individual, or $300,000 for a household. So that's well above the area median income, but that applies no matter where you are. Right. So that is the same if you live in Kingston versus if you live in California or Buffalo or what have you. So that's the same regardless of where you are, whereas other ones are more specific. It's hard because there's so many nuances for each individual program, and we're trying to provide as much broad information so that people realize how many different things that are out there to help get funding available.
Mm-hmm. But through this presentation, through talking with you and through talking with folks at WEACT and of course our office, as much as we can give more information, or at least point people in the right direction to be able to get what's best for them. Right.
Exactly.
Great. And we touched on this a little bit, but just it looks like we are running out of questions here. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff, but is there a place that people can get detailed info and access to these tax credits and incentives?
Yeah, so I think we touched on just a little bit. So we have information on our site, and there are different links through the IRS about some of these information. The goal of our consumer benefit guide, which we put in the chat, is sort of to break down some of that information from the IRS. It can be a little bit bureaucratic in language, and make it a little bit more easy to read.
Wonderful. I'll give it a second if anyone has any additional questions to put in the chat, but I think it's clear there's a lot out there and it makes sense to take advantage. It can be really daunting. It feels really overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me, trying to figure out what I can qualify for or what we should do and when it's available, but it's definitely worth putting in some of the time to figure out where they are, what we qualify for, and how to do that going into next year when these are available, because not only will we save money in upgrading our homes and our appliances and our heating systems, but we all will save money on the back end, and using more energy efficient appliances and heating structures will save us a lot of money, and will also then clearly hit the goals of the CLCPA faster for using less energy too. So it's kind of a circular system here that we can all be part of, making sure that we have a planet to live on for the next generation. And I really commend President Biden and the federal government for this incredible investment, this really historic investment in the shift to renewable energy and making sure that it's affordable, much more affordable for people of all walks of life across all of our communities. And thank you very much, Julie and Matt and everyone at the League's Education Fund for the work that you do. It's great to partner with you on this, and I know you'll be a great resource for everybody listening in today.
Great. And I actually just want to mention there's 2 companies that are in the area that have already taken advantage of the IRA from on the sort of the more the commercial level. One is a company called Magruder Solar in Ulster County. They're doing a 5 megawatt renewable energy project, and they're investing $6.7 million. There's a West Shore Solar project that's also in Ulster County. That's an investment of $3 million for 2 megawatts of solar. So we have like companies that are specifically in the area who are already taking advantage of this. And in the state, private companies have announced about $47 billion of total investments as a result of the recent federal action across multiple legislation, the CHIPS Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act, including, over $40 billion for semiconductors and electronics, almost $700 million for EV and battery manufacturing, $2 billion for clean energy manufacturing, $547 million for biomanufacturing, and $2 billion for clean power. So there's a lot that New York is going to be benefiting from as a result of this. That's not the amount just from the federal government. Those are the combined investments that they'll be able to take advantage of because of these laws that are out there. So we're really excited about that.
That's great. And we've got just under the wire here, one more question. Can we talk about good resources for home energy audits?
So NYSERDA actually has on their website by region a number of home energy auditors that you can look at. I myself had that done from their list of energy audit companies. That is a great idea to do. Very often your utility will pay for it or it'll be free from NYSERDA so that you can see what can be done and how much money you could save by taking different actions. For example, they'll tell you whether or not it's worth it to put in new windows as opposed to how much money you'll save and how much it'll cost to put in insulation. I know a lot of our houses are very old and they're not properly insulated. They'll tell you that. They'll tell you, how much you could save by getting a heat pump and these other types of technologies. So I would really suggest going to NYSERDA, and I would suggest looking at your utility provider. Again, I have not looked at Central Hudson, but I know that when I had it done in my home in Albany, National Grid had information about it on their website. So I would not be surprised if Central Hudson doesn't have it on their own. And I have already reached out to a contact I have that's associated with Central Hudson on the earlier questions related to getting the information out there on the IRA and state tax credits.
We love real-time follow-up. Thank you. That's great. And a great point. Thank you, Dawn, for that question about home energy audits. It's really important, especially going into next year when this will be available. But just for everyone to know, everyone should be looking at that for their homes. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you have questions that you think about later on as you're thinking about this presentation, please feel free to send them to our office. You know how to find us. The contact info will be in the comments. If we can't answer them, we will pass them on to our friends at the League and make sure that you get an answer. And please make sure that you are checking in, making sure that we're getting all of the funding that we can get for our residents here in the 41st District. So Julie and Matt, thank you for your work. Thank you for taking the time tonight and appreciate everything that you do.
No, thank you for helping to get the word out to everyone in the district, because we really want to make sure that people are taking advantage of all the federal funding that's available out there right now to help us move towards a green energy economy. So it's really exciting, something that we can do to help us save money and help save the planet at the same time. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.